Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today for another episode of Limitless Live. I am Olga Benyaminov, owner of Exceed Learning Center, and I'm so pleased to be here with you on the second week of February as we talk about emotional intelligence. So, if you're here live or listening later, I want you to know something right away. If you struggle with emotional reactions, if you feel overwhelmed, triggered, or even shut down at times, there's nothing wrong with you. You are not too emotional. You are not weak. You are just human. Last week, we talked about naming your emotion. We covered why naming is so important for your nervous system. And this week, I want to talk about what happens after the emotions actually show up. Today is about regulation, not repression, not control, not pretending that you are fine. Because emotional regulation is not about being calm all the time, it's knowing how to just basically come back to yourself. And this particular topic is so dear to me because this whole month we talk about emotional intelligence, and even though I consider myself emotionally intelligent and I read a lot of books about it and I try to follow the right approach, being responsive rather than being reactive, sometimes it does hit me. And I December, for example, for me was a very challenging month where I really reacted a lot more than I responded. So there's nothing wrong in making mistakes as long as you identify it and you know where you went wrong and how you can actually make it right the next time. So today I really want to talk about reaction and responding. A reaction most of the time is automatic. We do things because we feel not safe, because we have a situation that triggers us. Responding is more intentional. So when would one react versus respond? So a reaction happens, let's say somebody said something and you snap at them because you didn't like what you heard, but you didn't pause and responded. Or when someone have done something and you just shut down, you don't respond at all, that's also a reaction. When someone is over explaining, when you're trying to get your point across, that's reacting. When you have this urge of people pleasing, when you have withdrawal, or the opposite of that, you're exploding, like all of your emotions are coming out, that is all reacting. Responding, on the other hand, is really just pausing for a minute. It's just pausing, accepting that situation, understanding what had happened, and choosing your response. You're grounding yourself. You're giving yourself time to internalize what had happened before you actually respond. Responding is communicating clearly. It's not hiding, it's not running away, it's not ignoring. It's really communicating. And it's okay if people don't agree. There is a way to communicate and still honoring yourself. So the difference between reaction and responding is really the space. And emotional intelligence lives in that particular space. So, an author of a very famous book, Dr. Viktor Frankl, if you guys have read his book, it's incredible. He's a Holocaust survival, and the way that he dealt with the situations were really through responses versus reactions. And he has this quote where he says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. So, emotional regulation is really learning how to create that particular space for yourself. Now, I want you to ask yourself, why do you think regulation is so hard? Why is it so hard to do? Because most people don't realize that when you are triggered, you're not being dramatic. It's your nervous system that being activated. Your body is actually struggling with certain answers. Your body is asking, am I safe? Am I being seen? Am I being threatened? And am I alone in this situation? So, an author of the book The Body Keeps a Score, Bessel, Dr. Bessel, he explains that trauma and emotional stress live in our body, not just in our mind. So, when someone raises their voice at you, or when someone ignores you, or when someone criticizes you, or even when someone pulls away from you, your body reacts before your logic can even catch up. And that's not lack of discipline. That's biology. And like I just said, I consider myself very much emotionally intelligent, and I work on myself to recognize certain things. But even me, I trip. And even me, I had a situation in December where I reacted as opposed to responding, because there are triggers. So when you have a trigger, what you have to learn is really pause between the trigger and the response. The pause doesn't have to be long. It's just sometimes, it could be sometimes something like just taking a breath, counting 4, 7, 8, like I teach all my clients, breathing, inhaling for 4, stop for 7, and then exhale for 8. When your inhale is shorter than your exhale, or otherwise stated, exhale is longer than your inhale, what it does, it actually activates your parasympathetic nervous system. All those trigger responses are your sympathetic flight or fight. Flight, fight, or freeze. There are 3 types of responses that we all have. You either flight, you run away, you fight back, or you freeze. Some people just don't react at all. And that is also a nervous system response. So if you just take a moment and you do that activity of breathing, pause, just pause. You may not react the way you wanted to react, because now you're intentional on your response. So pause before you actually start explaining. Pause before you're defending yourself. Pause before you react. In other words, just decide on your course of action. That pause tells your nervous system, I am safe enough to slow down. And your simple tools are really just one deep breath with a long exhale. It could also just be something as simple as just putting your feet on the floor and just saying, I don't need to react right now. And that pause is self-respect. Emotional triggers are unmet needs that we have. And this is the big refrain. Most triggers are not about that moment. They're about something that happened to you before, or even at that moment, that did not meet your needs. It could be something as simple as anger. Sometimes the anger comes because you have an unmet need for boundary. Anxiety is because you have an unmet safety or certainty. When you have sadness, sadness is unmet connection. Why are we being sad? Because there's some connection we're yearning for. Resentment is a big feeling. It's a feeling of unmet respect. And of course, overwhelm is unmet support. When do we feel overwhelmed? We feel overwhelmed when we have so much going on and we feel like we have to deal with everything ourselves. That's when you don't have enough support to deal with that. So Dr. Gaber also teaches that emotions point us towards needs that we didn't learn how to meet. Say that again to yourself. Emotions point us towards needs that we didn't learn how to meet yet. We sometimes don't know why our reaction is that until you start analyzing and you're understanding why Why were you upset? Why were you sad? Why were you reactive? There are certain triggers that you did not understand at first. But if you pause and you start asking yourself, why am I so triggered? What caused me to react the way I did? And what do I need right now? And once you learn to do that in every reaction, in every situation, that's a true emotional maturity. Now let's clear this up. Self soothing and emotional shutdown is not the same. Regulation is not numbing yourself. Regulation is not ignoring. Regulation is not suppressing or pushing through. Regulation is not even pretending that you don't care. Because all of those feelings are being emotionally shut down. Regulation is actually acknowledging the feelings. It's calming down your body. It's staying present to yourself and offering yourself compassion. Now, self soothing sounds like something like, that is hard and I can handle it. You're self soothing yourself. Or something like, I don't need to fix this right now. You're helping yourself understand that this is not something you need to deal with right now. Or even something like, I'm allowed to feel this and still be safe. Regulation doesn't disconnect you from your emotions. It actually helps you stay with those emotions without drowning. So, someone said something hurtful to you. Let's think about it. Because that's a real life scenario that can happen to anyone. Someone said or did something hurtful to you. We can have a reaction, and a reaction can be an immediate defense. It could be raising your voice. It could be an emotional withdrawal, right? Blocking someone, ignoring someone. But then you're going to have a regret later. A regulated response is really pause, take a breath. Tell yourself that landed hard. Or tell the other person, I need a moment. And come back to this when you are grounded. Same emotion, different outcome. And that's emotional intelligence in real life. So when something happens to you that is so hurtful at the moment, pause and think. I want you to pause every time you feel overwhelmed. You can even put your hand on the chest. And I actually heard in one of the podcasts I was listening just a couple of weeks ago, when you put your hand, it basically stimulates a hug. So when you put your hand on your heart or put both your hands, which actually gives this calmness and releases those hormones of calmness. So placing one hand on your chest and taking slow breath in and long breaths out can actually regulate you at that moment of stress. You can also say yourself something silently. I am safe in this moment. I don't need to react right now. I can just choose how to respond. So instead of reacting, choose how to respond. So this week, I really want you to reflect. I want you to look at situations that's happening to you throughout the week and just think for yourself, what is the situation that triggers you most? And what do you usually do when you have a situation that triggers you? Do you react or do you shut down? I know that I personally react, and this is something I have to work on. But either reacting or shutting down, they're both opposite sides of the same problem. Either reacting or shutting down is a reaction, it's not a response. When you are reacting, ask yourself, what is the need that is being unmet right now? What's underneath your reaction? There's always something underneath that reaction. And what would help you feel calm and grounded right now? Sometimes it takes time to identify this. And for me personally, I know it took me a few weeks to actually identify that I was in reaction mode. And it took me some time to really get to ground myself and took myself out of the equation and say, that reaction is not going to work, and work on myself to actually be more responding. And a response sometimes is, the not sometimes, it's always the right thing if you can identify it soon enough. So here's the truth that I want you to walk away with from this session. Emotional regulation is not control. Emotional regulation is self-respect. You lose your self-respect when you react, especially when you react for something that someone else did to you and they're not hearing it. It's saying to yourself, I deserve peace. It's even saying something like, I don't need chaos to prove that I care. And I can honor my emotions without letting them ruin my life. You're not failing when you pause. And that's a very strong thing we all have to understand. Sometimes we don't pause because we want to react real fast because we say, oh, that demands a response. Mm-mm. You are growing when you learn how to pause. And I hope you'll walk away with this, because whatever I'm going to talk about next week builds on this. Next week, I want to talk about emotional intelligence in relationship, how empathy and boundaries can actually coexist. And that comes from a very empathic person. I have so much empathy for everyone and everything that sometimes I forget to put the correct boundaries. So I want to teach you what I've learned from my own experience and how that boundary can coexist with your empathy. But this week, let's practice this. Let's practice that simple pause, taking a breath, and asking yourself, what do you need? And that need comes from within you. Remember, you are learning to respond instead of reacting. And this is extremely powerful. I hope this session resonates with you. Let me know what you think. Comment below, share, and please, let's practice this week so we can meet again next week and continue this path of emotional intelligence. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I'll see you again next week.